guys, John here, John the pilot. I'm doing everything in my power to help anybody who's serious about becoming a pilot and or a professional pilot, and helping you along the process, sharing my 23 years of aviation experience. Today I'm talking about 8 things that I have found that are by far the most challenging for if you're trying to begin to start your journey to becoming a professional pilot. Well, but first, who am I? Well, I've got over 23 years of aviation experience flying helicopters, small planes, big jets. And what I did was I was a helicopter instructor many moons ago in Torrance, California, in little R-22s, joined the Army, flew Blackhawks, and then from there I went off to Customs and Border Protection, trying to help protect America's borders and fly helicopters and airplanes. Then from there I got hired by a cargo outfit, but I am now at a major airline. I've got over 23 years of experience that I want to share with you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get into number 1. Okay, the first and by far the most hardest thing for anybody who's beginning aviation, especially trying to be a professional pilot, is perceiving how much finances it will cost, or how much it will cost you, and also the time commitment that is involved with this specific process. So the first thing I want you to identify with is, what kind of pilot do you want to be? Private pilot? Do you want to be a helicopter pilot? Private pilot? Do you want to just be able to rent airplanes and rent helicopters? That has a specific cost associated with it. Plus the demographic and also the geography of where you're located is going to have what is available for you cost-wise and also aircraft-wise for training. These are all specifics that you have to think about. For example, private pilot these days, and what I've seen based on my research looking at many different flight schools, just in a single engine fixed wing category, can cost anywhere from $5,000, some places even all the way up to $15,000. So depending on what kind of financial situation you have got to budget all these types of different considerations in order to achieve that goal. I've actually made a pretty helpful video trying to see if there's any way you can offset those costs. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link for that right here. Check it out. Now, from when you're becoming a private pilot, how much time does that take? Depending on your specific circumstance, and if you go 100% on your own, you go down to a local flight school, it is up to you how long that could take. I've seen some people finish their private pilot license because the stars and the moon were completely aligned with beautiful weather and check ride dates, that they've got it done in as little as 6 weeks. But during that 6 weeks, guess what they did? They ate and they slept, drank, airplane. And all they did was everything in their power to meet the hour requirements as far as Part 61 certification standards say, and also the requirements in Part 91 and or Part 141, in order for them to make sure that they could meet that criteria for their check ride. Now, moving on from there, get your private pilot license, you're gonna have to move on and get your commercial pilot license. You're gonna see, when you do a lot of research, there are a lot of schools out there that have these professional pilot program. I highly encourage you to investigate them very thoroughly if you're thinking about signing a major contract for a loan upwards of over $100,000. It has happened in the past where these flight schools will take your money and you give them $100,000 up front, and what ends up happening is the flight school goes bankrupt. When they go bankrupt, they take the funds from your loan and they have zero obligation due to the bankruptcy courts to pay you back. So guess who gets stuck with the loan? Now that I'm done with that warning, you understand the risks involved with it. Moving forward, do your due diligence and look at these flight schools very carefully. Now, when you're looking at these flight schools that are extremely accelerated and they claim all these great things about you being able to become a professional certified flight instructor within 6 to 8 months, there are provisions inside of those that say that's solely up to you. So when you sign the dotted line and you show up to training, you better be there, you better do what they have to say, and you better meet their little, I would say their training benchmarks along the way for you to make your check ride. Now, also when you're reading those contracts, be very, very careful that if there is a weather event where you can't fly, if there's maintenance issues with the aircraft, if they rebook the aircraft, or certified flight instructors are not available, let alone designated flight examiners are not available to do your check ride, you are not held responsible for that, because that is out of your control. control. To be a good student when you're showing up to a flight school, very simply put, all you need to do is show up prepared. Show up studied, show up with all your curriculum done, all your ground school courses, get those done so your CFI can sign off on them and you can be ready to take your knowledge tests. Take your knowledge tests and then you can make sure you meet all your flight benchmarks such as hour requirements, nighttime flights, solo requirements. So your CFI literally has you served on the platter to a designated flight examiner in order to make sure you can meet the check ride requirement. Pass it, move on to the next phase. These are all things that you have to consider. Now, with those flight schools, going back to time commitment, in a way, that is a good thing because it puts you under pressure. Putting you under pressure means that you're gonna try to meet certain goals and you're gonna try to get things done quickly. There is an added benefit to some of these pressure cooker flight schools or they call it pilot mills, because hopefully if you do your part and they say that they can guarantee you their part and it does happen, guess what? You'll become a pilot quick, gaining your hours, saving that very coveted time in order for you to get to a major airline, major cargo airline, wherever you choose to have seniority so your quality of life will be second to none. Remember, every single day that ticks by, there's somebody else learning how to fly who will get an interview sooner than you and have a better seniority number and therefore will be able to make more money, have a better schedule, and possibly fly better paying equipment and therefore having a better quality of life. Think about that. Other things that you have to consider is the time commitment. Even when you leave the flight line, it is up to you to do your due diligence to make sure you study and you know all the procedures moving forward, especially when you go from the first day you show up where it's all introductory to the last day where you're a competent pilot and you can show a check pilot that you can do a pre-flight, get the weather planned, make sure that you file a correct flight plan, whether it's IFR, VFR, whatever you're trying to do, and you can safely operate from point A to point B and pass a check ride. Everything is completely on you. Your CFI, if they're good, can show you, however, they can inspire you to study when you get home. Now, if you're somebody in my circumstance, I'm 44 years old. I've got 2 kids at home. My time is limited when I am at home, all right? So I have got to figure out how to budget my time very carefully between family, work, and any other things that I like to do for fun for me to get myself a mental break. If you're young and you're not married and you don't have other commitments, time will be abundantly available to you. However, what I see, especially with the younger generation with pilots, is people go do the minimum that they need to do at the flight school, and guess what they want to do? They want to go and live a young lifestyle, whether it be partying, going out, staying out all night. That could dramatically affect your performance for the next day's lessons and or flight. Who knows? So those are the pitfalls that I generally see, especially in the beginning. To wrap up, 1, when I'm talking about it, this is financial costs and commitments. This is the biggest pitfall that I see hands down for beginning pilots. They don't understand the actual financial commitment that could possibly be there. They don't understand the resources that could possibly be there. Take a look at this video. And or the time commitment that is involved. So consider that and think about it very thoroughly. And also budget. There will be things out of your control. It may be more money than you originally budget for, and it could take more time than you originally budget for. So consider that. One thing people fail to consider is this. I already talked about time constraints and financial constraints. Number 2 is what type of physical and mental health do you have? First thing I tell everybody before you're considering to becoming a serious professional pilot is make sure that you can pass a Class 1 physical. If you cannot pass a Class 1 physical, at least in the very beginning, you understand that there's a high probability that this may not be the career for you and you can move elsewhere. There's nothing worse when you've done all of this training and spent all of this money, especially for your private pilot license, to find out that you do not qualify for a medical because you waited until a couple days before your check ride to go and get your medical certificate. That's the absolute worst thing. Now, with that being said, do not fret. Just because you have some physical ailments or mental health disorders does not necessarily mean that you are barred from flying. I made a video here about myths that people think bars them from flying completely. And what I would like to do is have you check that thing out now. Here's the link. Therefore, you can find resources for you to possibly get into flying, or if you've lost your medical, get into a place where you can fly again. I highly recommend one of the companies at the very end. They've helped tons of pilots, thousands of pilots, get back into the cockpit with various different medical conditions. All right, so please don't give up at the last second. A lot of AMEs out there will also blanketly just say you're not qualified to fly. I highly recommend, if you do have an issue, consult these companies to get a second opinion before you completely just throw your dream down the toilet and choose another path. However, just keep in mind that when I say this, it is very, very specific on a case-by-case basis based on specific physical ailments and also mental health issues. Please consider being a pilot, and also all the things involved with it puts on a lot of physiological stress. You go through a lot of time zone changes. You go up and down in altitude tremendously. You'll fly in aircraft that have air conditioning systems that may or may not moisturize your body, so you'll get dried out. You can hear a little raspiness in my throat. These are the things that you have to consider that are taxing, especially time zone changes and differences, and also all the other things that have to do with very, very far long haul flying. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there is a constant joke around the medical community when it comes to pilots, is that they can tell the difference between a big long haul flyer and or a wide body pilot versus someone who flies narrow body. Typically, the people who fly very long flights and fly big, huge 777, 787, 747 aircraft look a lot more frail because of this type of flying that they do. It's very taxing on the body. Something to consider. The third thing I'd like to talk about that is challenging for beginning pilots is the amount of studying and the test intensity. I have taken countless tests, my private or general aviation career to my military career, and then going into Part 121 commercial air carrier operations. Quite honestly, I forgot how many tests I've taken. I can't tell you how many nights I've stayed up over and over and over again going through aircraft manuals, going through rules and regulations, going through what the weather predictability can be, learning about the weather, learning about aircraft systems, learning about physiological problems, thinking about everything, all the regulations that the FAA has. This has been countless hours of studying over and over and over and over again. And you know what? Even now that I'm at a major airline, guess what happens? I still study. I still have tons of learning that I have to do. I go back once a year, I get a check ride, and they also test my mental knowledge to make sure that I'm staying in the books. Therefore, I can be a safe professional pilot. These are things that people have to consider. And depending on the type of person you are, it could be very, very fun with all this information, or this could be terribly boring. Maybe you meet somewhere in the middle there. However, this is expected of you for the rest of your career. Do not ever think that you could ever skate easily and not have to study for the remainder of what's going on, especially even if you're going to be a private pilot, because there are rules and regulations where you have to take at very least a biannual or an annual check ride in order to maintain proficiency to show that you can be safe renting an aircraft and or flying an aircraft. These are the things that you have to think about. Most beginning pilots do not think about them whatsoever. I've actually made a really cool video. This company helped me tremendously. I'm gonna put a link into the video description here, so that way you know what you need to do if you just need to study, at least for your FAA practical written exams. This company is by far the #1 company that I recommend and helped me pass very quickly with flying colors on every single one of the FAA knowledge-based exams. There are so many things that I recommend that you do to save save yourself time and money, use that company. The next thing I want you to do is practice chair flying. What is chair flying? Chair flying is literally sitting in a chair, grabbing the posters of the airplane that you will be flying, taking a checklist, and mentally going through all of the procedures, just using your memory, visualization, imagination, and putting it all into practice so that your mind will already have been prepared to be put into the situations, therefore you'll learn faster. This is the number one tip I can give all beginning pilots, whether it's you're flying a Cessna all the way up to a big 747, even helicopters. I recommend you practice chair flying. It will make your brain get into the game from the start when you show up to the flight line, to getting to pre-flight, to actually getting all the way to cruise flight, and then landing and going home for the day post-flight. You'll have an edge up and you'll save so much time as opposed to having to learn it when you're actually at the airport. That is probably the best thing that you can do, period. Remember, chair flying. So another thing that guys and girls forget about is the weather can be severely unpredictable. You can be taking off from somewhere on the West Coast and landing somewhere on the East Coast, and the weather environment can completely change dramatically. You could be taking off from clear blue, 22, cab okay weather, and landing in 0-0 conditions, complete fog or icing, and you've got to be prepared for those changes in flight. Hence, all the preparation, all the studying, all the different maneuvers and procedures that you're going to learn are going to be ingrained in you depending on how well you prepare yourself when you're, number one, studying and learning how to fly, and number two, getting trained when you make it to your professional career, wherever that may be. When it comes to weather, especially when you're beginning to learn how to fly, weather can completely put a damper on your timeline. A lot of flight schools out there have very specific criteria where they will not allow student pilots to take off with an instructor based on their experience levels, because it could be, number one, with insurance reasons, and number two, obviously safety. Think about it. Let's say the weather's terrible, all right, and you have a CFI. Maybe they have 300, 400, maybe 500 hours, and they're teaching you how to become a basic private pilot. So you have less than 500 hours total experience taking off on an airplane that could be pretty expensive, and now, God forbid, something bad happens. Guess what? That aircraft doesn't come back, possibly, due to a catastrophic incident because bad decisions were made due to inexperience. So therefore, a lot of flight schools will not allow you to take off, and it'll take your timeline and it'll shift it further over to the right, which could be very detrimental to the plans and goals that you have. So weather can be extremely unpredictable in training. Right now, in my current job, I have taken off in beautiful weather, and yet lo and behold, you're looking and you're getting your weather briefings and you're checking out the HEDIS and the other airports that you're landing, and the weather is very low, and maybe or maybe not during an instrument approach you'll be able to see the runway. Well, the good news is, in the aircraft that I fly, it can do what's called an auto land and land on its own. However, you still have to know that there are limitations for that aircraft in order to do the landing on its own. There are specific length requirements. There are specific runway condition requirements. How good is the braking action? How much runway is available? Are things noted out? You have to be able to process all of this information and be able to put it into a very logical sequence so that you can make a very good, very smart, and very safe decision in order to get that aircraft from A to B, either with cargo, passengers, or whatever else you could possibly be flying. Weather can be extremely unpredictable. Think about it. Number 5, beginning pilots forget about stress and fatigue management. Yes, flying is great. You could see I'm here at a hotel in Austin, Texas, and you get provided a hotel room in order to rest. However, people do not realize is that flying can be very, very taxing on the human body, all right? Even in the beginning, when you're just learning how to fly and do something that the human body was never designed to do, it can be very stressful and it can be very exhausting. So in the beginning, it's a good idea to make sure that you do something to keep your physical fitness and also find a way to keep your mental health stability, because over time, when you set in exhaustion, mental cognition can degrade rapidly, stress can get higher, and then unfortunately, bad decisions are made and a safety event can happen. Other things to consider is that if you are a business and you have airplanes, guess what you need to do? Are you making any money with those airplanes on the ground? No. So these businesses will push to the very limits to ensure that those airplanes are flying as much as they can in order to generate revenue. There are rules and regulations that do prevent pilots from being completely exhausted, as what they have figured out in past studies and statistics. Maybe I can get into a video about that. There are limits to how much you can fly during the day, especially for commercial air carriers Part 117. They say, depending on the time you've woken up and signed in for duty, based on the rest of the duty day is how much you can fly based on how many pilots are with you, how many legs you're flying. It's a little complicated to get into. Leave a comment if you would like me to get into it. I'll love to talk about it. However, companies will push that to the max, and guess whose responsibility is to make sure that you feel fit for duty? You. It is completely up to you. Those are the things that you have to learn how to manage. You can't learn it right off the bat. It starts day one from your very first day when you start flight training. Number 6, oh, you gonna make some money. Oh, you gonna make tons of money. You're a pilot. You're a professional pilot. You're gonna make so much. Oh my gosh, I remember I had a guy come and say, I should have charged you more money because I just found out you're a pilot. Well, the truth of the matter is, it takes a while to get to a position where you are making those big bucks. So number 6, it's a huge reality check, especially this day and age, to understand that you could possibly have slow career progression and also relatively low pay versus what you thought it would be. Take into account how you live. Take into account your standard of living. Take into account the fact that there are specific unfortunate situations going on, that some airlines are declaring bankruptcy right now. A few of them actually closed their doors. This is 2024, after we've been crammed down our throats from a lot of different news outlets and, the hype about the pilot shortage. Well, what we're starting to see is that's slowing down drastically. So if you're planning on becoming a professional pilot and you're doing it for the money, just know that it may take some time in order for you to make that 3-figure career faster than what you thought it could have been. Chances are it's going to take you a while. So going back to the beginning, remember, each day that ticks by and you don't have the qualifications to apply for that big paying airline job, somebody else is taking that seat. Time is not on your side. That's something to consider. Number 7, something to consider is that when you are a professional pilot, when you're making the bigger bucks, so to speak, or you're in the career where you're getting a 6-figure salary, you do have to consider that if you have a family, like I do, I am away from home right now. My family lives in Florida, and I'm currently in Austin, Texas. I've got an 8-month-old child, and I also have a 6-year-old. Well, guess what? I'm not with them right now in order to enjoy the awesome things that you would enjoy as with being with your children like a father would. So I have to make sacrifices for that. So what me and my spouse, my wife, what we do is, as frequently as we can, thank God for technology, I will take the time to do FaceTime with my kids, and when I'm home, do as much work-life balance as possible. I love to take my kids to school. I try to do everything I can at the school projects with them. My little 8-month-old baby, I try to do everything I can to feed him, change his diapers, to be there for every waking minute, because I know in order to keep the lights on at my house, my job entails me to get on a plane and take off and go somewhere else. So those are the things that you do have to consider. If you like being at home, you may want to consider finding some jobs allow you to fly in the morning and land in the afternoon, and you go right back to the same bed that you sleep in. The job that I'm currently in right now, it has that availability. However, I do not live at the airport that I fly out of, so therefore it's more beneficial for me to go on 2, 3, 4, even 5-day trips, depending on how my seniority allows my schedule to build. So those are the things you want to consider. It's very important to have a work-life balance, especially if you have family. please consider that if you're thinking about becoming a professional pilot. Every job is a little bit different. There are some places out there you could be gone 17 days straight. There are other places that I've learned, especially if you're a helicopter pilot, you could be gone 2 weeks, home 2 weeks. There are many different options out there. Do your research, figure out what might be the best fit for you, and later on, if things change, you could always try to figure out maybe you can switch into a different aircraft, different company. Totally up to you, but take consideration there's a high probability that you're gonna have to be away from home. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about. Number 8, beginning pilots or people aspiring to be pilots don't really consider the ramifications when an emergency happens, and it could be very life-threatening and very catastrophic. In the total of my 23 years of experience, let's see, 3 years of that was combat. I can only count on my hands. Maybe I think I got shot at about 14 times that I know of. That could have been life-threatening. And other times, I've only had 2 helicopter engines quit on me. We only had 1 engine, so you had to land. And then other life-threatening emergencies have only happened in piston-driven smaller airplanes. We were flying, and I had a situation where the engine was vibrating really, really bad. And me and my flight instructor decided to land. Thank God we did, because we were very, very close to having that engine separate from the aircraft itself, which would have been a very bad thing for center of gravity, and we possibly could have crashed real bad. So why do I bring this up? You're defying the law of gravity for a living. The law of gravity is out in the universe, holding planets in orbit. It's holding buildings down to the ground. I mean, you know, right now I'm on the 6th floor of of a hotel. Gravity's holding all this stuff together. And now what you're doing is you're taking air and you're beating it to submission. You better have in the back of your mind at all times that when things go wrong, you are 100% prepared for it and ready to make it happen. I have been teaching people in the past that have completely frozen up and did not know what to do. Chances are it's because the true fear set in. I highly advise that you sit down and you think about the fact that your life could be threatened at any moment's notice based on completely unpredictable situations that can put you into a place where you need to respond quickly, methodically, and also accurately to make sure that you can get the aircraft on the ground safely. Now, you're going to be taught all of this stuff if you're flying, and it doesn't matter what aircraft you're going to be flying, you will be taught emergency procedures. So what you need to do is make sure that you understand the ramifications of this, because gravity is non-discriminatory. It does not care about what race, creed, color, religion you are. Guess what it's going to do? It doesn't matter either way. You hit the ground, you hit the ground, right? What's that old saying? The glass hits the stone, or the stone hits the glass. It ain't going to hurt the stone. Chances are it ain't going to hurt the ground when you hit it. But we all know what could possibly happen if you hit the ground. So these are very serious things that you need to consider. There are tons of things with aviation. There are unfortunate incidents every year where people do get hurt, and it is something that you have to consider. Well, I hope those 8 things were beneficial for you. Let me know in the comments what else you would like to see, any other information that you would like. I'll be happy to put together a video for you. If you enjoyed it and you liked it, give me a like, share this video. Totally helps the algorithm, helps grow the channel, gets this content out to other people that would possibly benefit from it. So I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time, John the Pilot, see ya.